Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Terrace Scottish Football Podcast. I am your host Craig Fowler, back once again to review a weekend of Scottish Premiership action. Helping me to talk through the 6 games in the top flight, the last which took place before the split, it is Craig Anderson. Craig, how's it going?
Not bad. Got a rare quiet weekend to myself, so been enjoying that by sitting on the sofa today and watching 2 Premiership matches, which I don't often get the chance to do without having to kind of watch it back on 1.5 speed at 2 in the morning or whatever. So yeah, happy to do that, and and two good games as well, which helped.
Yeah, certainly. And I mean, there was a lot of things to talk about this weekend. I managed to catch 4 matches. One of those was not a good game. The other one you probably wouldn't say was a good game because it wasn't very competitive, but there was at least some good football and some terrific goals scored in it. And a lot of drama. Another good weekend. I think this has been a very good Scottish Premiership season. I wrote an article about that around about the halfway point. Kind of thought I was jinxing it at the time, but the action has kept up, the drama's kept up. There's been a lot of goals scored. Unlike last campaign, which I thought was shit, this has been good fun.
Yeah, and there's plenty of battles still to be had as well, as we'll get onto, which I think does help. It's like obviously the titles, not one of those, but everything else is pretty much up for grabs. So yeah, good fun, I think.
Yes, and one battle that is also done now is the battle for the top 6. As I said, the split is now in effect in the Scottish Premiership with 5 games to go. And congratulations once again to St Mirren for the 3rd consecutive season. They have made it to the top 6, and they've done it with a 3-2 victory over Ross County. Ross County took the lead in this one in Paisley. Ronan Hale opened the scoring. Caelan Boyne-Munson equalised for the hosts before Jonah Ayunga put them 2-1 ahead in the second half. County weren't done there though, as they came back through Jordan White. But Roland Aduwu, with 4 minutes to go, grabbed the winner, and that, coupled with Hearts' 0-0 draw away to Motherwell, means it's St Mirren that go into the top 6 instead. And Craig, I'm not going to sit here as a Hearts fan and say I was glad to see St Mirren get into the top 6 instead of my team, especially when St Mirren and Hearts don't have the best of relationships in terms of the supporters over the years. However, I will say if I'm putting my Hearts hat to the side and I'm putting on my Scottish football loving hat, I would say it was better for Scottish football to hold that you had the drama, you had the scenes of Aduwu scoring that goal. As it could sometimes be when it's a big goal at the Smeeza Stadium, the shaky cam kind of from the West Stand as the West Stand goes mental, and you got to have the scenes at the end where they were properly celebrating. I'd rather those scenes had been Lauren Shanklin tucking away that chance he had in the 97th minute at Fir Park, and then running to a jubilant away stand. But it was glad that part of me was glad that we got a fitting end to the split battle, as opposed to what looked like was going to happen, which is that St Mirren were going to draw or lose against Ross County, and Hearts were going to draw this terrible game with Motherwell and fall ass backwards into the top 6.
Yeah, and I was at the Smeeza Stadium when St Mirren got into the top 6 for the first time, and it was like the big build up, the big sellout, and they lost 2-0 to Killie, but the results of the other games went their way, and they managed to get in anyway. And you can see they've got something kind of going at St Mirren in terms of, I think the smaller size of the stadium really helps them build atmosphere. He's talked about that there. They've got a perfect setup for kind of these types of games where they can get everyone in, it's busy, and I saw a few people kind of questioning why they were celebrating so much, but I think it's a pretty impressive achievement.
Fuck off. Can we fuck off with the celebration police bollocks, man, honestly?
Because I think it's 3 years in a row in the top 6. I don't think that's something Killie have done from memory. It's quite a big achievement to manage to maintain that level of consistency over a long period of time. I think it would be fair to say this has been the poorest of the 3 St Mirren teams that have done that. I think they haven't been generally as brilliant this season, but they have still had pretty big moments. They got their win in Europe, which obviously isn't related to the league. They got their 2 wins over Rangers. They've got they got the result, obviously the big win against Killie a couple of weeks ago, which is a bit of a monkey off the back for them as well, and given the kind of record of the 2 teams, and they get this moment as well. So I feel like they've had a pretty enjoyable season. I think the enjoyment of the season probably stops now because they've got very little to hang on to, and also most likely will suffer several defeats. But nonetheless,
they still can. It can still be a laugh because they can still, even if they only win one, say they lose 4 but win one of the last 5 games. If one of those victories is against Celtic or Rangers, then that's a good time, regardless of the context. And if it's a victory that completely fucks over one of Dundee United, Aberdeen or Hibs for 3rd place, then that would be good fun as well.
Yeah, and so I think when you look at all the teams, and I don't think there necessarily was a load between St Mirren down to Dundee, to be honest, in the table. I think St Mirren probably have just about been the ones that have been deserving of that over the season. And yeah, I think the way in which they won this game kind of indicated that as well, because they keep plugging away. They're a team that keeps plugging away. You don't really see very many performances for them where they fall out of a game.
Yeah.
And going behind, I feel like it would have been very easy for them to go behind, start thinking, well, not only do we need to win this game, but we're also relying on something elsewhere, and start to not, like, they're not obviously going to give up or anything like that, but I could think it would be very easy to start to kind of drift away, but instead they get themselves right back into it very quickly. What I would say is, for all the praise Jordan Namiss has had this season, I think he's at fault for all 3 goals.
Yeah, me too. No, I saw somebody say the 3rd one, it's just such a good strike and it's past him before he can react. I'm not sure about that. I think he can react a bit quicker to that. He can certainly do better for the first goal. Yeah, he's obviously unsighted, but as Stephen Naismith said on Sports Scene, he should anticipate it coming a bit quicker than he does. And obviously, it's hard to know who is most at fault for the 2nd goal between him and Wright, but he is still culpable. And we could get on to the county soon enough in terms of what they should be kind of doing towards the end of the season. But it doesn't bode well for them. The fact that they've lost 4 games in a row, and Amisa has been one of their better players since he's come into the team. That was in December. And if he's going to have a poor end to the season, or just even kind of regress to the mean, because it's a small sample size of a guy who didn't have a club until December, so it could easily be that he just had the purple patch, then that could be them in a big trouble.
Yep, but sorry, if you want to start in going back on St Mirren, I think we talked about Boyd Munn scoring that goal. I actually think I'm most likely to forgive the goalkeeper for that goal, because I don't think anyone expects Boyd Munn to hit that shot. It's not like it's very far out, like for a player, like kind of from a kind of standing position, if the ball's coming towards them or being passed to them, and there's a lot of kind of momentum generated. So I think he strikes it very, very cleanly. He has had a really good finish to this season.
Yeah.
And just at the right time, obviously, in terms of St Mirren. And a player who I think has had quite an interesting career in terms of kind of when they picked him up last year, and kind of the nature he kind of snuck in under the radar a wee bit last season, and then has generally been a mainstay this year. Form's been up and down a wee bit, but I think he has, as much as anybody, kind of contributed to this, and starting to find some goals, which was maybe a wee bit missing from his game before.
Yeah, he was missing for the starting 11 for the middle chunk of the season. He was always about the squad, but he didn't have a great beginning to the campaign, so it's taken him a while to work his way up to it. It was just a case of the fact that two-pronged. One, he got an early season injury, which with the European games kind of disrupted his form, and I think his confidence suffered as a result. And St Mirren were just kind of playing a little bit differently early in the campaign in terms of the kind of their shape, but now that they've settled on that 3 of O'Hara, Phillips and Boyd Munn, they all complement each other very well, and that you've got the kind of Bash brothers in O'Hara and Phillips, with Phillips just being such a prototypical St Mirren player. O'Hara a little bit similar, with a bit more quality about him, I would say, but Boyd Munn's with that technical ability, that passing ability, that just little bit of stardust in there to kind of complete them. But as I said at the start, fair play to St Mirren, because especially when you consider what they went through this season, 3 of their summer signings were out of the club by the time we even got to January due to various troubles with the law. Sean Rooney especially was a big miss, because it was clear from the few games you saw for him that he was going to bring a lot to the team, and another player who really could have fitted into what St Mirren try to do. And it feels like they've just had, other than maybe the defence, which has been pretty settled all season, with occasionally Iacovitti coming in for Taylor when they want to be a bit more maybe defensively sound, and Taylor when they want to have a bit more going forward. And they've been largely kind of that they've all kind of played well, they've been settled, but the rest of the team, it feels like they've just had contributions at various points. O'Hara ended the season very well. Phillips, I would say, was great across the whole stretch. Boy Mun's just getting his form back towards the end. Then you also look at like Olasanya early in the season was huge for them. Their best player probably until, don't know, around about January, February time. He's not been that great, I would say, in 2025. But Miko Mandron's got his form back a little bit. Ayunga's finally started to show something again for the first time since his injury. They made a good move in January by fucking off Ellery Balcom and getting Hemming back in instead. And
they've brought in wing backs. I think that's been a wee bit of a...
Declan John's been a good signing.
Well, but Alabiosi on the other side, I think, is maybe the jury's still out on him in general as a player at this level. But what they did is, I think they were often trying, partly with what you described with Rooney and with Brown as well, not being leaving the club. For a while, they had been trying to play what I would say are predominantly centre halves in the wing back roles, and it not really working out, and they've just having two proper wing backs in the side has really kind of given them an extra dimension, I think.
So, Ross County, before we move on, I respect Don County for trying to move away from the club relying on Jordan White quite a lot. He's, like previous managers, County fans have moaned about Jordan White being the kind of centre of the attack. What was it I used to call him? Like the reverse lighthouse. Like, he's not trying to keep ships away, he's trying to bring everything towards him, but he's just tall and he just stands out, and he's not very good at most other things at this level, other than the fact he's a decent finisher and he's brilliant in the air. But it's not great to watch for that reason. It's not a great brand of football, and he's not a particularly great player himself. He's not... Well, there's joy to be had from some players like that. Like if you think of a Lyndon Dykes, who is quite a lot of fun to watch in his style at times. You don't really get that with White. Cowie's tried to evolve them and try not to rely on him. However, I think what we've seen, and especially when Noah Chilver's out, and I think he's out for the rest of the campaign, without him, he's the player, the creative player who can put the team on his back in certain games in an attacking sense and win them points, either through his creativity or from scoring goals or just getting the ball and going at the opposition. Now I don't really think they have that as much. The jury, I think, is very much still out on Josh Nisbet. He's got some things that are good about him, but I don't know if he's creative enough to pick up that slack. And so you've seen Cowie, you've seen him try that Phillips, who was brought in January. You've seen Alex Samuels kind of coming in at the team at points this season. Cowie himself has tinkered a lot with the side across the course of the campaign. It's something that's frustrated Tony, I know. I think it's obviously worked to the most part because they're not at this point in time in 11th place, and that's anything above 11th place for County, especially after the last couple of seasons, is a win. But the form's poor at the moment, and even though they didn't win this match, they still give a really good go of it, and I think a lot of it was down to the fact that they just kind of went back to basics with those strike partnership. Get White up there, get balls up to him. Yeah, it may not be pretty, but you can make the ball stick in the attacking third, and then have Ronan Hale, who works hard, runs hard, and is the best finisher we can see at the club. And he's got the intelligence not only to kind of pick up those balls around about White, but to get into those areas around the penalty area to score goals. So, Cowie, no chance you're listening to this, but in case you are, just pick the A2 for the rest of the campaign and just go with that. And I think they will end up being fine. But if he starts to, there's a possibility he will just start to tinker with things a bit too much. And County, like I say, they are on a bad run at the moment. And as I mentioned earlier, especially if Amisa's going to be in poor form, then they are potentially moving into serious trouble.
I think White brings a wee bit of continuity as well, because you look at that St Mirren team, we obviously talked about the two wing backs they brought in Phillips, you mentioned, but every single one of those other players, and I think several of the subs that came on were there last season. And we look at the Ross County team, it's like, all right, we're in April now, but with the exception, I think, of White and Randall and Brown, I think those were the only three that started that were there last season. I think I'm right in that. So I think sometimes just having someone like White about who has been there, done it, and kind of knows how it goes is not always the worst thing.
Yeah.
And maybe you do your evolution in the summer when he's not at, like, you know, don't try and evolve with the person you're trying to evolve away from still there, if that makes sense.
Hi. Yeah, that is a good way of putting it. Shall we move on to our second game? This place took what? Sorry, Craig, that's not a good sentence. This game took place on Sunday, and it was Pittodrie, the early match between Aberdeen and Rangers. A 2-2 draw with Rangers equalising in the 96th minute, despite the fact they were down to 10 men. Aberdeen opened the scoring with a terrific free kick from Leighton Clarkson. They then doubled the advantage after Ross McCausland was sent off for 2 yellow cards in the first half, with Pap Gay scoring just before half-time. You thought, that's it, Aberdeen have got the points wrapped up. It was very much a Rangers reserve team. And you thought, well, Rangers don't even really necessarily care about this that much, so this game is over. Rangers come back in the second half, hangs at Igaman, scores 4 minutes into the second period, and then right at the death, as I said, Yanis Hadji, after Cyril Dessers had struck the woodwork. Craig, for Aberdeen, to get 3 points against Rangers, when Rangers look like they're giving them 3 points ahead of the split, and to keep pace with Hibs, where they would have only been a point behind still, with Hibs playing at home to Dundee later in the day, this was a disaster. And I don't know about you, to me, so much about this just looked like a complete bottle job.
Yeah, well, I do agree to an extent. Obviously, when you're 2-0 up and you against 10 men and you don't win, there was an element of a bottle job. But I actually thought they were pretty poor through the whole game. I didn't actually really think they worked that hard to get 2-0 up. I thought they were given that lead to an extent.
I mean, yeah, we can get on to Rangers soon enough, because I do agree. We'll get on to the fact that Rangers were much better in the second half with 10 men than they were in the first half with 11. But I think in Aberdeen's general performance in the first half, I thought it was a lot better. I thought they played with a lot more intensity. They played with a lot more pace, like they're passing. They moved the ball around a lot later. There was a lot just more confidence about their play. They missed a good few chances, some good chances, in addition to scoring the 2 goals. And if they'd kept it up after the break, I still think they would have won easy, even with Rangers playing better. But they just didn't repeat that performance in the second half. It could be a fact that the goal comes so quickly in the game, 4 minutes into the second period after the restart, and it's maybe put a seed of doubt into their collective minds that, right, okay, we are playing against 10 men. We are playing against a team that is kind of a bit of a reserve team. However, as you pointed out before the game, we were talking about the Rangers team in the chat, there is still good Rangers players there. Like, Igaman is a good player, and there were other good players on the park. That maybe just had them put a bit of doubt into their mind. But it really didn't feel like they had that same zip, that zest in the second period. It seemed like they really doubted themselves. And when I also talk about bottling it, not only is it the chances missed at the other end. Now, there was the kind of hard luck with the goal being disallowed, but it should have been disallowed.
It's a terrible rule, but under the rule, it's 100%.
It is a terrible rule. That should not have been disallowed in kind of the spirit of the game. However, the rule is that if the ball hits the hand of an attacking player and he gains an advantage from it, then it is a foul. Because it's ridiculous at the other end, because it had it hit Nisbet in the exact same kind of situation, then I don't think it would have been a penalty.
No chance. It doesn't know anything about it.
Yeah, because his hand was tucked in, so it wouldn't have been a penalty on the other end. But in the other box, it is a foul. That's just so stupid. But he misses a chance. The subs that Thielen made, he bottles it as well. Because some of I didn't mind them moving bringing Devlin on and moving Shinnie into centre midfield, because they were lacking a bit of that intensity and, like I say, a bit of belief. And so you get Devlin on. He's all about, like, when Devlin's good, he's all about hard running, and that's how he earns his corn. Graham Shinnie as well. You get him into the centre of the park, get him in the centre of the action. He was playing well on the left, so you put him in there, have a bit more influence, and try and rally the troops and trying to see them towards the end of the game, which they very nearly did. However, bringing on Esther Sockler to play wide right and bringing on De Bag. Now, De Bag is a new signing and has looked decent at points. He was bad, though.
He was terrible. I thought you saw 2 of the worst centre forward performances I've seen in a long time from 2 Aberdeen players in this game. And Papi Gay does it and manages to get a goal anyway. But I thought he was hopeless for an hour, and I thought Daba came on and they didn't quite cross over, but because there was about 5 minutes where neither of them were on the pitch. But I thought that it was that run where he gets him. He does well initially. He gets himself into position pretty well on the shoulder, gets away, and then he just runs the ball out wide and then falls over his own feet and puts it out for a goal kick. And then there was another time where he came back towards his own goal with the ball. And it kind of reminded me, I remember that clip of Jack Hendry when he was playing for Celtic, where it was against Partick Thistle, wasn't it? And he was like striding out of defence. And then it was like he glitched. It was like he kind of was just turning around everywhere, like not really sure what to do. I had that same vibe for Dabin. I think he ended up just like running into a Rangers player and giving them the ball back. And there was just too much of that from both forwards.
Sorry, another reason though I'd call it a bottle job. Two more reasons actually. Firstly, just kind of while we're still on the Aberdeen going forward, they did actually manage to gather it and they did actually manage to kind of get themselves right. I felt like for 10, 15 minutes before it kind of got to extra time, but it looked like, okay, if there is a team going to score a third goal, it does kind of look like Aberdeen. Once Dessers came on, I was like, oh, if I was an Aberdeen fan, I'd be panicking right now that he's going to equalise, and he very, very nearly did before it hit the post, and then Hadji scored with a terrific effort. But I did feel like they eventually kind of got over the kind of spooked period, and they were like, right, we should be in full control of this game. Let's just go and win it now. And they were very close to doing that, like I say, when Nisbet missing his chance and then having the goal disallowed. But the other aspect, and what really stands out to me, Matt's Noster. So he's poor enough for the first goal. And I actually think, like, if you take out his two big mistakes, he had a good game overall. But obviously, when you make two massive errors that lead to goals in a game that you can give up a 2-goal lead to 10 men, you can't really say that he had a good game. So the first one, he gets out, as you pointed out in the chat, he gets out jumped by a child in the air for the ball. And it's one of those ones where he's racing out when he maybe shouldn't do. He's maybe been a bit too aggressive. Maybe just hang back, stay in his position, and go for it and not allow himself to be out jumped by somebody who's got a kind of better angle on the ball than he does. His error at the equalising goal, which initially lets in Dessers, is unbelievable. It's unbelievable because there is no... I can only think that when the ball comes together, I think it's Clarkson and I forget the Rangers player who it is, are in the middle of the park. I can't remember. Is it Barron? No, I can't remember. There's a coming together. I think he initially thinks the ball's going to rebound off them and come his way. And so he starts like charging forward. But it's like, regardless, it's in the middle of the park. That is not the danger. The danger is the guy who, his finisher is a bit hit and miss, but he has a ratio of a goal every second game for Rangers. And because he rushes out and he completely misreads it, once the ball is played in behind, there is acres of space for Cyril Dessers. I couldn't believe my eyes. I was like, how have you let Cyril Dessers through on goal at that point in the game? And then from that point, I think there is just a degree of bad luck that it goes to Hadji and he just... Sorry, it initially goes, I can't remember who cuts it back. It goes to somebody else, maybe Jeff Day, and he knocks it to Hadji. Maybe he could have closed him down a bit better. Maybe Shivney should have been a bit more alert to the danger, but I had to look back at it. I don't think they necessarily do anything wrong. It's just a brilliant finish into the far corner. So there's a little bit of hard luck there with the ball going into the actual back of the net, but Noster, at that point in the game, to make that kind of error, it just kind of summed up kind of Aberdeen having a shaky mentality for that second 45 when there was really no need to.
Because you said Rangers stepped up and they definitely did, but it wasn't like it was some astonishing performance from Rangers. There were players, you mentioned Curtis there, apart from winning that header, might as well not have been playing. Like, he's a young boy, he's come into the team.
I think he done a decent enough job defensively when you were worried he was going to get roasted because he's apparently an attacking midfielder who was playing wing back.
That's why there wasn't anything like terrible he did, but you're like... There were quite a few non-entities in the Rangers team, like they weren't really doing that much. Like Cortez and Danilo both went off at half time, but even when Diamondi came on, who is one of the better players, I thought he had a pretty poor game when he came on by his standard. Maybe a bit of calmness, which might have helped, but he used the ball really badly.
Do you know what? I would agree with that, and I don't think he necessarily played well, but I think his sub was a big reason for Rangers getting better in the second half because I think they really did need that calmness in the middle of the park.
One thing I will say about Barry Ferguson's Rangers, and maybe it shouldn't be a surprise given the type of player Barry Ferguson was, but you just assume with the nature of the appointments, staunch Rangers men coming in, that they're just going to revert to, obviously, Walter Smith style football. And I actually think they quite a lot were trying to play on the deck a lot and trying to play kind of wee, triangles and wee one-touch stuff and all that, which I wouldn't really have associated with a lot of that, especially in the first half. It didn't really work, but it's interesting. Like, but at the other end, I can't believe how bad they are defensively. It's so many. I mean, okay, you can kind of understand it to an extent because this today in particular is a defence that is purely chucked together.
Yeah.
To put 3 people on the park, like
purely chucked together, also protected by basically Conor Barron on his own. Because I mean, it was kind of weird that Rangers, because obviously they had to bring on Tav, and he
was hopeless for 70 minutes.
He was pish. But they had to bring him on. But obviously they were wanting to rest him. But then they make the 2 changes at half time, and I thought that was weird at the time. I was like, well, I mean, are you basically raising the white flag with this game, or are you not? Like, surely you maybe want these guys to get a bit more of a rest. But I do wonder whether he kind of thought, right, I'm resting these guys to get us better prepared for Thursday and for them to be fitter for Thursday. And he maybe thought, it's going to do us no use if we get absolutely hammered by Aberdeen. Like, if Aberdeen take about 5 off of us, resting players is actually going to be counterproductive in the end. So I think that's potentially what he was thinking at halftime, because he brings on Jeff Day, he brings on Diamande. But I just thought it was weird because the initial team bashed me in the middle of the park alongside Barron in front of that defence. I was like, you're just being like, it just screamed of, who cares? Don't give a fuck about this game. And yet they still got a draw out of it in the end.
Yeah, and I think just a couple of other people to touch on. McCausland, that because not only, right, I mean, okay, he's been played in a slightly unfamiliar position and has been a wing back. Like, he's not a wing back. He's a more attacking player. But he gets, every time he got the ball, his touch was atrocious when he was trying to go forward, which is a bit he's meant to in theory be good at. The first booking is a really bad one, and then the second one, it's like, not only is it a terrible attempt at a tackle, but it's also stupid because it's like, you're booked in. It's one of those. It's not like, sometimes players make a challenge where it gets away from them a wee bit, and it's like at first they think they're pretty much guaranteed to get the ball when they're on a booking, which is why they make it. It was one of those where it's like, you must know going in here that you have got above a 50% chance that you're not getting this ball and you're getting sent off. And yeah, it was rank stupidity. And in a normal circumstance, you would say that's probably his last game for Rangers, but he's probably got another 3 seasons in him, so who knows. But yeah, a thoroughly enjoyable game, I would have to say. I really enjoyed watching it, which is not always the case when these two play, because I think there's been a couple of good, interesting ones, but there's been a couple of kind of pretty dull.
Well, let's get to a game that ultimately I did not enjoy watching, and that was Hibs taking a 3-point lead in third place thanks to a 4-0 home win over Dundee. Goals coming from Rocky Bashiri midway through the first half. Kieran Bowie off the bench made it 2-0 in a game that was, to be fair at that point, still pretty competitive, but then the roof caved in on Dundee afterwards, as it often tends to do, with Gale added a third and Bowie getting a fourth to get a scoreline that I wouldn't say was necessarily reflective of the game, but I think is reflective of how much confidence Hibs are playing with at this point in time and how much quality there is about their squad. And the first thing that stood out to me from this, I couldn't help but think back to the last time Hibs played Dundee, which was at Easter Road in August. So this was the time around about my birthday. So I went through to Edinburgh. I think it was about August 25th, I think the match was. It was a 2-2 draw. And this was when Hibs went 1-0 down early on, but they came back. They were 2-1 up and comfortable in their lead. Didn't look in any danger. And Gray panicked and took off an attacking player for a defensive player, trying to shore things up. It was counterproductive. Dundee got themselves into the ascendancy and Simon Murray equalised for them. And after the game, Tony and a couple of my Hibs pals who were part of the group who met up were like, nah, David Gray's not got it. It's funny to think that now, especially when they were saying in the summer, but David Gray he'll get patience for the Hibs support. But I kind of get what they meant. Like, it wasn't necessarily the biggest overreaction, because it is one of those decisions where you look at it from a supporter and go, not sure about this as a manager. Like, that's something you shouldn't be doing as a Hibs manager, especially when he's somebody that's spent that long at the club. and knows that if you're playing at home to Dundee, you should just see the game out without having to kind of resort to shutting up shop.
Well, we say played so long at the club. At no point, only a very brief point during his entire Hibs career would that have been true. He didn't play for Hibs in the sort of Tony Mowbray era. He played for Hibs with the exception of the Neil Lennon.
He was there under Lennon. A Lennon team that finished fourth. That team would have done it. But I think you know what I mean. Like,
I do.
So, and it's incredible to fast forward to now, and you see the polar opposite with the way that Gray uses his squad and uses substitutions, and is very much a forward-thinking manager. I mean, he does have pragmatism. He's not somebody that's kind of gung-ho or anything, but like the way that he uses his attacking players especially, it's just very impressive. Tony said it before, the way he uses his squad in general is very, very good. But you see it with like the subs today. Kieran Bowie coming on. I did wonder before and asked Tony about it. I was like, why is Bowie not playing ahead of Kukarevich? Because I just, for what I've seen of the two of them this season, because I was quite impressed with Kukarevich before, but as Tony has also said, it looks like he might just be already hampered by the number of injuries he's had in his young career. From what you've seen of this campaign, Bowie looks a better player, but Bowie has not long back from injury himself, has said himself recently that he's not going to be properly fit until he's had a pre-season. So Gray is just managing him really intelligently, bringing him off the bench, and other than Celtic at home, Bowie's looked at his best when he's come off the bench. You see the impact he makes in this one. He scores 2 goals. Not only that, Dwight Gale comes on, brings him on at the right time when Martin Boyle's just starting to flag, brings on Josh Campbell for Junior Hoylett when you're adding a bit more physicality of the team, a bit more renewed energy when you're trying to see the game out. And then, of course, Nicky Cadden coming back into the side. Jordan Idah. I wondered whether when Cadden went down against Celtic, whether that was going to be a big blow to Hibs because he was such an important player. But Idah, having started the campaign so poorly, has been excellent of late, and he was good again in this one. And Cadden comes on and swings in a cross right away for Bowie to score the fourth. And there's another part of the team as well, but it's just like so much of Hibs is just clicking at this point in time. And if they don't get third, it'll be down to 2 things. One, it'll be down to Hibs doing what they usually do and managing to make an arse of things, but it'll be down to the horrendous start they had to the season when Gray was clearly still working things out, because this version of Hibs is clearly the best team outside of Celtic and Rangers, and on domestic form, maybe even the best side out of Celtic.
I was going to say, it feels like if you lopped off about the first 2 or 3 months of the season, Hibs would be properly battling for second at the moment. I'm sure that is true, literally, with the table, but the momentum is very much in their favour results-wise as well. The thing for Hibs, we've talked a lot about some of those players, but there was a couple of guys that I think have been a wee bit unsung I wanted to talk about in this one. First one's Junior Hoylett. I thought he was very good today. He's a bit older and kind of comes off after the hour mark, but I think he's been pretty good in his entire spell in Scottish football. I think he was, given the absolute state of a situation he joined Aberdeen in, I think he kind of was one of the ones that stood out. Had I thought, a particularly good game in the Scottish Cup semi-final for Aberdeen last season. And then I was still a wee bit surprised when Hibs signed him, just on the basis of it seemed a bit of an odd signing. But nonetheless, I think he's, especially of late, done quite well. But the other one is the man who's heavily involved in the second goal, Lewis Miller.
Yes. I wanted to talk about Miller as well.
I still don't think he's a particularly good footballer, he's got a lot of endeavour. It's a kind of classic Australian footballer, I suppose. There's like shades of like Ryan McGowan or these kind of guys. Lots of endeavour, very fit, very athletic, and also tends to understand the game pretty well. And what you saw for that goal was the benefits to me of a back three system, which is he gets the freedom, he wins the ball, I can't remember if he wins the ball, but he's on the right hand side of the defence, he kind of comes into midfield, he ends up getting the ball, I think he kind of moves it on quite quickly, but he just continues his run. And Dundee are kind of getting overloaded at that point, and we'll get on to they just generally struggled defensively as a whole. And he gets that ball and he manages to do the right thing with it as well, which is really hard when you are, okay, sometimes a right back, but right sided centre half in this case, and you pop up on the left wing. it's very easy to just lash at something or do something stupid, but he doesn't. He gets it spot on, and it leads to. I think that was the second goal. I'm trying to remember if it was the second or the third now.
It was the second.
Because it came at a pretty important time because Hibs were really good in the first half, and Dundee didn't really do anything. Like, they didn't create major chances.
We'll get to them soon enough.
But the game was very much in the balance at that point, and Dundee looked like they were maybe starting to come into it a wee bit, and that just wiped it out at that point, and that was the difference maker. So yeah, I really liked what I saw from those two players.
So yeah, Hoylett is just, again, I think just the way he's kind of been used in Gray when he plays him as a number 10, he kind of seems to rotate him and Campbell, depending on the opponent, and that. Like, for if he wants to go a bit more, if Kukurevich or Bowie isn't the team in particular, and he needs somebody to go a bit more direct, he'll use Campbell. So maybe a team set up a bit more when he's wanting to play it with a 3, he'll play Campbell and drop Campbell a bit further back. But in other games, he uses Hoylett as a 10, and you can just see his intelligence, the way that he's in his experience. Because he's got like some of the qualities, obviously diminished quality than he was at his best, but there's just still a bit up there in the old noggin that it enables him to pick up these pockets and to influence the game in those ways. But Miller, as you were saying, he's not a great footballer. He's not the worst you've ever seen, but he has so much energy and physicality, and it means that he's got his uses in Scottish football for that as a right back and as a right wing back. However, especially when you're playing at a club like Hibs, playing like anybody in the top 5 biggest clubs in the country, you have to have a bit more technical ability than he has at this level. And so when you play him at right back or you play him at right wing back, yes, he does have his uses and he has his games where he really does affect things going forward because he can really be a source of chaos in the opposition penalty area and he'll run all day up and down the wing. But it does make him easier to stop. And when he's easier to stop, that means that your right side is quite impacted by that. When he's doing it from right centre back, however, then that's not really as much of an issue if he doesn't influence the game going forward, as long as he's obviously not making any big errors defensively. Because it means it allows him to be that more of an X factor, that if the X factor's not there, it doesn't really harm the team. It's just another part of the squad that's a bit of another nightmare for the opposing team to have to deal with, because you don't often game plan in football. And that's why when 3 at the backs work the best. I saw at Hearts a couple of seasons ago under Nielsen when it was Suter on one side and Kingsley on the other. With guys who are comfortable taking the ball up the park, you see the opposing team be like, right, well, we're trying to deal with all this. And now we've got centre halves coming at us. And it's just something that's I've always been a fan of, and I think more teams should do it instead of having just big lumps back there. And it's better to watch. And that's what he's doing. That is just the perfect role for him. And it's one of many players at Hibs who Gray has just found the perfect role for. We've talked about a few of them already. Jack Iredale on the left of the 3 is probably too small to be a centre-back in a back 4, but in a 3, he's great. The 2 Caddens, Nicky for his crossing ability at wing-back, and his work rate, and I think Chris Cadden as well is probably his best position as wing-back, because he's not quite a full-back, he's not quite a wide midfielder, he's not quite a centre midfielder. I think he can kind of, his abilities, especially his athleticism and willingness to get up and down the wing and just kind of reliability works best when he's playing in a 3-5-2 kind of system. Boyle now just playing as an out-and-out forward. Hoylett, I talked about Triantis helping Levitt to now get back to the form he was shown in his first season at United. Everything's just working for them right now. I really wish it wasn't Hibs.
Yeah, and it's because they've got the 3-point advantage going into the split, which in the top half in particular, 3 points is massive, because in a normal season, like you've got 3, you've only actually got like 3 other games against teams that aren't Rangers or Celtic typically, and obviously they don't win all the games, but it's like really hard to overhaul anything. But they've also, and this has really helped with it, they've got a massive goal difference advantage as well. They are, I mean, there's still football to be played, but they're very much in pole position to take that third, which I think that you're absolutely right, they're fully deserving of in the across the whole season. But yeah, I think a lot to like at the moment.
Dundee, before we move on. So, yeah, obviously they lost 4 goals. We've talked many times about how shite they are defensively. That was goals numbers 68, 69, 70 and 71 for the league campaign. It really is in play for them to concede 80 goals this season, which is mental for a team that you don't actually think of as that bad. because the last teams to concede 80 goals in the Scottish top flight were a Dunfermline team that was pathetic and was relegated like ages before the end of the season, and Gretna. You don't think I've done this Dundee side on that level, and that shows you how bad it is at the back.
That's because they've scored 50.
Aye, well, that was the thing, though. That's what I want to focus on, because we've talked too much about the shit the Feds. What's weird about them, I think, is that they have managed to score 50 goals when you look at a performance like today, and you're like, you've only got one good attacker. It's Simon Murray and a bunch of other guys, and that's it. And it's like, there was some mitigating circumstances, I think, for it today. And that Lyle Cameron wasn't there. He is I don't think he's had a great season necessarily, but he has had good games. And I think you do kind of notice sometimes when he's not there that he is an absence. And this was a game like that because he was a kind of missing link between the midfield and the attack. Josh Mulligan, I think, done some good things at points, and especially with that kind of run he had to win a free kick right on the edge of the Hibs penalty area, but he just doesn't kind of bring the same kind of qualities in terms of his passing and his linking. You look around Murray, though. Scott Tiffery plays well once every 4 games. Adewumi, he's just not pulling his weight at all at the moment. In fact, ever since his loan been extended, he's been pretty poor.
You can see he's better than you, or you can tell he is much better than they are getting from him at the moment. He's got more about him than what they're seeing.
Yeah, because I've kind of thought that when I've looked at him all season. I've kind of thought, you're a better player than what you're showing. Even when he was playing well, I was like, you should actually be doing more than what you're doing. And he just doesn't seem to put it together. And like I say, recently his form has really been toiling a bit, and he's just not even. I don't know if it's just down to the lack of confidence or whatever, but he's even like not contributing to the press as much, not doing the defensive work as much, not getting stuck in as much, and you can forgive that if there's moments of magic in the final third, and he played well against Rangers recently, but in this one, like the attack they had when it was very much on for him to curl a cross in. Those crosses are sometimes they are difficult to do, but he done the worst part of it. Like, they're difficult to get it exactly right, that you want to get in the striker's path and you want to avoid the goalkeeper and you need to avoid the defenders and stuff. But you usually could forgive it if they kind of overhit it or play it too far ahead of like the forwards running in. It's just kind of hard to time those. But he just kind of played it like immediately into the first defender in front of him. And you're like, God, you've got to be pulling your hair out if you're a Dundee fan seeing that. And the other thing I wanted to kind of focus on, which Gary kind of brought up a good point to me, was that he just doesn't think that Tony Docherty, if you're looking towards the end of the season and whether they're going to get themselves out of trouble, he just doesn't think that Docherty's got the blend quite right this campaign between experience and inexperience, with the caveat that there are mitigating factors and that Shaughnessy was injured for most of the campaign. Scott Fraser played 1 game. Clark Robertson, terrible today, but he is an experienced player. And he's been missing for a lot of the season. Jordan McGee, as Jordan McGee tends to do, has been out. And there's even guys that aren't necessarily like 19, 20, like Larkish and Adewumi. They're still getting their first proper seasons of like proper football. Billy Cometio and Aaron Donnelly are similar. And then you've got the guys we've kind of talked about, Mulligan, Cameron, Robertson. Yeah, they do have experience. They played a lot of games for Dundee, but they are still young as well. And it's just not the balance, as I say, doesn't seem to be quite there.
I just wanted to talk about, it's the only one that I think we didn't discuss. The first goal is, I think, an absolutely terrible goal to lose. The fact that you're allowing someone the first touch from a corner 3 yards out for a tap-in, I think is unforgivable from defensively, but also what is the goalkeeper doing if not commanding that part of the area? Like, I understand that he's trusting his defence, so I'm not absolving them from blame. But surely at some point you're like, this ball is coming into my zone. It's in the middle. Like, Bashiri is obviously about 3 yards out, right in the middle of the penalty box. I do not see how you can allow that goal to go in. And it came at a time where I felt like Hibs were maybe starting to run out of ideas a wee bit. Like they'd created quite a bit in the first 20 minutes or so, and then it was starting to fizzle, and then it's just such a cheap goal.
Right, let's move on to our 4th game. I was actually surprised this came 4th, but there was just a lot happening this weekend. Celtic 5, Kilmarnock 1. Celtic were 4 goals up inside 24 minutes. Rio Hatate with a belter to open the scoring. Dyson Maida added to that. Cameron Carter-Vickers with a goal that made me make an involuntary noise, which made my girlfriend shit herself because she just wasn't expecting it to happen. And then Rio Hatate added a fourth before Danny Armstrong kind of took the sting out of Celtic a little bit, I would say, with a cross that floated into the back of the net. But Celtic eventually restored that 4-goal advantage in injury time with Anthony Ralston with quite a nice finish of his own after coming off the bench following a sustained period where he was an unused sub for Brendan Rodgers' side. Craig, I kind of thought this was Celtic's season almost in a microcosm. The first half of it. Like, we often say, like, we get to talk about Celtic and often we would talk about Rangers. Rangers to a lesser extent because their trousers often fall down and it's funny to laugh at them. But with Celtic, they're just too good and it becomes a bit boring. But you don't, when you're watching them in games like this that are live on the telly, you don't judge it as much when the football's as good as it was in the first half. And I thought they were excellent in the first half. Not only scoring a couple of good goals, but the play was quick, it was decisive, they really moved the ball around well. Greg Taylor, as Chris Sutton continually brought up in commentary, was excellent with his movement into the midfield. That really threw Kilmarnock's game plan completely out of whack, and Celtic were just relentless and going at Killie. And then the second half. And I don't want to criticise too much because I don't want to piss off Celtic fans listening to this because I know it seems very churlish of a fan of a side who didn't make the top 6 this past weekend to be like, oh, you must be annoyed at like winning all the time and it's just a bit boring. But I can see like for social media that Celtic fans are getting a bit annoyed like recently that there's been too many games where they haven't played for 90 minutes and they are just kind of going through the motions a little bit. And yeah, it's fine because they've had the league wrapped up since, I don't know, September. But if you're going along every week and you're still getting big crowd, there was still a huge crowd for that Killie game because they thought this might be the weekend they could possibly win the title, even though they wouldn't have had the celebrations that day. They would have had Rangers to have lost to Aberdeen. You still kind of want more. You kind of want the Ange Postecoglou team where it was just like continually going at the opposition from minute 1 to minute 90. And the second half was just a bit dull.
Yeah, I think obviously mainly trying to watch this game through a Kilmarnock lens. Unfortunately, I was taking my dad out. We went to a West of Scotland game yesterday, which was very appropriately timed. But we were sitting in the restaurant, and the phone just kept buzzing. 1-0, 2-0, 3-0, 4-0, and I was like, right. Right, I see. And I had the absolute fear at that point, I have to say. And then fortunately that kind of relented. And for that reason, obviously didn't go back and watch the full game. But from the point of view of, you see it through a Killie lens and you're obviously trying to be critical and our supporters will be, and rightly so, given that's back-to-back 5-1 defeats away from home. That's not necessarily very good. But it's also felt much more like one of those things that could have happened to any team. The way that game went, I'm not saying Killie were without fault because that's certainly not the case. But the 2 goals from Hatate and Carter-Vickers are incredible. Like those are, because I thought it was interesting that the XG for Celtic was less than 2 for this game, and it's like because two of you, and that's even with Maida's goal being literally a tap in from a yard out, because two of the goals are like one in 1,000 goals in terms of just how they go in, and yes, it probably helps that they'll fancy having a shot in at the goalkeeper who's in and all that, but 2 incredible goals. Felt a wee bit sorry for Lewis Mayo for the second goal because it's almost a really good piece of defending, and then it's not. And the other goal from Hatate, I mean, could have been defended a wee bit better, but it's not like, it felt very much like a Celtic team getting a reaction from losing last week, and it
also says for the rest of the season, because you were starting to kind of worry about them because like you often say like you can't flick a switch in sports, like you can't just do that, you can't just go through the motions and expect to just turn up when it matters. I think the Celtic team probably can't just do that.
Yeah, I think they won't win the Scottish Cup this year. I've got a feeling somehow about it that they seem a bit, maybe they have been all season, but they just seem a bit susceptible to just complete flops of a performance, which they don't often do it. And yeah, they need one of the two opponents that they might face to turn up and really take advantage of that, which is still a big ask. But I think you're talking about them. It feels like they need to they have a poor performance and then they bounce back, and you think, right, that's them, and then they don't necessarily string it out for very long. We'll wait and see on that. But like from the point of view of, like, I was obviously very pleased that they did slow down a bit, but I did see the first half of the second half in the pub. We were trying to pick a pub and we were kind of hoping that they were going to have the English Premier League game on, and then we went in and it was like, nope, Celtic v Kilmarnock. So we had to watch 20 minutes of it, and had that been the first 20 minutes of the game, I would have been saying that's a really good 20 minutes from Killy. Like, that's exactly what you would have wanted to see in the first 20 minutes of the game if you weren't already 4-1 down at that point, because we kind of limited them to not very much. In that period, Adam Idah was particularly rubbish, I thought.
It's actually what I had him down in my notes. I thought, do you know what, I'm not going to, because I feel like I've picked on Idah quite a bit this season. But it did really stand out to me that, like, Celtic were having that good a performance and he still stuck out. Like, you're just not on the level of your teammates. Like, it's wild. I didn't understand the transfer. Well, I obviously understood why it happened, but I just thought, especially the Celtic board, who have never been shy, never been hesitant about making decisions that are unpopular with the Celtic fans. I don't get this transfer at all. I think it was very clear last season that he wasn't worth £9.5 million. The fans obviously wanted him because they gave him a great moment although I would say Jack Butland gave them a great moment. He gave them a great moment by scoring that goal in the Scottish Cup final, and he also came up big in another couple of moments as they won the title, including that match at Ibrox as well, which was key and kind of turning the tide when it looked like Rangers might have the ascendancy in the title race. So he came up in big moments, and as a fan, often that is just what you care about. But fans themselves should have seen the fact that in games, he just wasn't, like, he was nowhere near on a level of Dembele, Edouard, Kyogo. Like, just you don't want to spend £9.5 million. If they could have brought him back for £4 million or something, yeah, fair enough, absolutely. Change your pace forward. He's not scored as many as he should have thought, but you would have thought he would have scored goals in the Scottish Premiership with kind of fairly good regularity. He's a great player for bringing on and tacking on a few goals at the end of matches. He's very good at that. And that's that. And like I said earlier, that's not even necessarily that much of a criticism I'm making there, because as a Celtic fan, you want players to come off the bench who are hungry and want to add to the scoring. You want to see your team win 5, 6, 7 when you're 3 or 4 goals up. But again, £9.5 million, mental.
On the rest of it, I thought obviously it was interesting to see the lineup from Celtic, with Rodgers last week kind of talking about, to me, saying he felt there was a few players whose heads weren't in the right place or who didn't really fancy it, or all the rest of it. So it was interesting to see the ones that were dropped, and particularly I thought Schlupp and Kuhn, who were the two that I think Schlupp's been quite poor since he came in, to be honest. I think he's been more of a sort of making a point.
As the chairman of the non-Celtic supporter Greg Taylor fan club, I did think you would say that.
Well, no, but I think it's been a making a point thing. It's like Greg Taylor, I don't know what the situation is with his contract, whether he's been offered something and he's decided he doesn't want to be second choice when he knows what's obviously coming next season, or what's going on. It feels a little bit like a point being made.
I mean, if I was Greg Taylor, I'd just bet on being first choice for 2/3 of the season.
Yeah. But for whatever's going on there, it felt like that was kind of a point-proving thing. And Schlupp's had some good games, but he was rotten last week. Not to be fair, that Taylor really improved it last week when he came on. And Kuhn being the other one. I mean, Jota, Trusty both dropped out as well, but I don't really think their performances have been. I mean, Trusty didn't play that well last week, but like, it's not like they've been. That felt more like a natural rotation. But it'll be interesting to see what happens going forward with Kuhn in that respect. The other thing from a Kelly point of view, I think predominantly is, I've kind of always felt this kind of result was what the result was going to be, but to get out of the weekend with the other 3 teams immediately round about us all losing, and actually not really taking that much of a hit on the goal difference compared to, like, obviously Dundee got 4 taken off them. We're still right in the mix in terms of goal difference. when I was sitting at 24 minutes in at 4-0 down, I certainly would have taken that, to be honest. And it'll be interesting to see when the fixtures come out. I think that could have a big bearing in terms of like when they are and stuff like that. It's obviously going to be a battle, but I think Killie have generally been reasonably good at bouncing back from results like this. Like, we obviously took 5 off St Mirren a fortnight ago and then immediately bounced back and won the next game. So I don't think it'll matter too much.
Right, let's move on to our penultimate game, which was Dundee United 1, St Johnstone 0 from Saturday. The only goal scorer in this one was Emmanuel Adebayoga, and not a great game, I think, by all accounts. I would say that it's just it's part of Dundee United's kind of back to basics approach. And to be fair, it's worked for them the last 3 games. They've gone back to the 3 at the back. This one they had it was kind of like a classic Goodwin team from earlier in the season. 3-4-3, 1 forward on the park. Terrible game of football, but they got a clean sheet and 3 points. And now they're pretty much guaranteed European football, I would say, unless Hearts or St Johnstone win the cup, which is not going to happen. Although you think there's a higher chance of that happening than I do, but or maybe you just think Aberdeen are going to beat Celtic in that Hampden final.
But yeah, this was classic Dundee United of this season. I've never really been that impressed watching them in terms of like thinking, oh, this player's good or that player's good, but yeah, I don't think you can do anything but praise Goodwin for the way that he's managed to string the squad together, because I don't think there's necessarily loads of quality. They've now obviously got quality in the wing back positions again. I think Ferry's again kind of coming onto it after maybe having a wee dip. They've got one of the better strikers in the league, but it's not like a team packed with brilliant players. But what they are able to do is, and yet again, it's another set piece goal, is find ways to win games, and they took advantage quite ruthlessly of the mistakes St Johnstone made. Obviously, the corner coming from St Johnstone having possession inside the Dundee United half, and in two touches of the ball, it was out for a corner to Dundee United. That in itself is quite poor. And then they're falling asleep on the corner and Adebayoga goes in. I don't know who the player was on the line. I couldn't quite make out who it was, but I think I couldn't quite tell who it was, but really should have got a lot closer. He was it felt like he was looking around everywhere and didn't really see the enormous centre half steaming in towards him to kind of tap it in. Fair play, it was quite a controlled finish, because I have seen a lot of players try to lash at that ball and not do what he did. And then I would say it was a lot of huffing and puffing from Dundee United. From St Johnstone, sorry. They had lots of half chances and wee openings, but it wasn't like there was some standout save from Walton or anything like that. The 4-4-2 that St Johnstone obviously went with last week, they kind of tried to emulate the same type of approach. I don't think they got as much out of their forwards in this game, and definitely not helped in it. And they'll be pretty concerned, I would guess, about Mitchell going off, just because they're running out of defenders essentially.
Dre Wright's out for seems the rest of the season with a ankle strain. Boza Miskulic is out for a long time with a knee injury. Yeah, they're just going to run out of players. Yeah,
they did bring Sven Spangler on, and kind of. I don't think in the situation they're in, they really are in a place where they can afford to have these injuries. You really need to be at full strength. They're 5 points behind Dundee, they're 6 points out of that. It's a hard ask at this point. This is a game that they would have been targeting as being able to get something.
I've seen because Johnson fans have obviously, as any football fan would be, especially when you're in not bad form, as St Johnstone have been for a few months.
I don't get it wrong. It's not the last 2 or 3 months that have got them in this position they're in.
So usually fans can be quite bullish and think they can still get themselves out of it, but it did really seem like a lot of fans were resigned to relegation after this one, that due to the Mitchell injury along with Wright being out, and just due to the fact that, as you kind of mentioned with Killie, this was an opportunity. And I know it's away to Dundee United, and I know Dundee United are going to finish in the top 5, and that's a tough ask for any team battling relegation. But United didn't play well. St Johnstone, I mean, I didn't see the game. This is one I didn't catch, but certainly for the stats, they looked the better team. I mean, you don't manage to take advantage of that then it's just a bit deflating. And they're going to, and as Jamie Beatson said on, there's like I saw a few teams saying this, like they don't like that Hearts have dropped at the bottom 6. And I think St Johnstone, especially because Hearts are just on a tear against St Johnstone at the moment. I don't know how many games in a row it is, but it feels like Hearts have won about 7 or 8 in a row against St Johnstone. And the match is likely to be at Tynecastle unless there's some, post-split shenanigans with the fixtures. And they're going to have to... So that's going to be a tall order to win that game. And if they don't win that one, they're going to have to win at least 3 of the other 4. Yeah, maybe even all 4 to really give themselves a proper chance.
It does depend. Like, I would... I'm going to curse myself here. I don't think Kilmarnock will do it, but would you be hugely surprised if one of Ross County or Dundee didn't win a game until the end of the season? I don't know. I don't think it's inconceivable. I don't think it'll happen. So, I think everyone will win a game, but
I would say no, because I think this is quite a really kind of competitive and good kind of bottom 6 battle where there's not really any teams that I look at and go, they're terrible. That's another reason why the league's been good this year. There's not been like a Livingston last season where it's just like automatic defeat. But what does give me pause for thought is this is the season of Raj sequences with teams going on mental unbeaten runs. So that's 17 unbeaten for Hibs now. Aberdeen obviously had their start to the season. Hearts had their dreadful start to the season. Hibs had their dreadful start to the season. And so Ross County have lost 4 in a row now. So could County finish the season with 9 straight defeats? It seems unlikely, but in this campaign, maybe they write off.
If that happens, you're suddenly looking at, well, maybe they only need 2 wins or a win and 3 draws or something. It's not inconceivable. I think they are in. They will need to win their first game after the split. It feels like that. Like you can't start being 7-8 points adrift with 4 games to go and try to rescue yourself. But at the same time, they've given themselves a chance that I don't think they really thought many of us thought they would have at this point.
No, certainly not.
And yeah, I think it would be a wee bit disappointing because in another day they would have taken something out of that game.
So I just got a bit stuck in my head there whether to move on or to talk about United. I'm going to briefly mention something about United. Ross Docherty again in the starting 11, so does United get a result? I don't think Dundee United are going to get third. I would obviously very much like them to. Of the 3 teams in contention, they were definitely my first choice for getting third. I just don't think they're a good enough team overall compared to Aberdeen and Hibs. However, they've gotten this position by largely doing what they did in this game, not making stupid errors, being hard to beat, being good defensively. And what's really helped them with that, especially with the injuries and with Kevin Holt leaving in January, which really seemed like it was going to kind of derail their season, was that Declan Gallagher coming back in after missing a game, and he's put in 2 huge performances, just at a point as well where he was starting to look a bit creaky again. And you kind of thought, is this him now? Just it's feeling like this has happened about 3 or 4 times now in Gallagher's career over the last 2 or 3 seasons, where it's like, that's him finished now, but he keeps on fighting back. Pardon the pun.
Well, yes, but it was especially, I think, when he left Aberdeen, and you thought, right, this is him. But he had a good spell with St Johnstone, and then he went to St Mirren, and then he went down. Yeah, it's interesting, but yeah, I agree with you, but there is also that feel of them that you could easily see them just winning 3 games 1-0, and like when Kelly finished third.
I think to get third, I think they would have to win at Easter Road, and I don't see that happening.
I just remember when Kelly got third, it was like we lost, ended up losing. We lose the first 2 games after the split. We lost to Celtic and we lost to Aberdeen, and you're kind of like, that's it, all gone. And then we ground out 3 single goal wins in the last 3 games, and you're like, how did we manage to do this? And I think we had better players than Dundee United do now, but it's I don't think it's past them. I think they'll finish 4th. I think Aberdeen will be the ones that will end up 5th. But I think it'll finish how it looks now, basically. But
so let's get to our last game. So this is probably what a lot of people have been waiting for, but as we always do in the terrace, the 0-0 draw goes at the end of the podcast. I remember once a few years ago, I was fucking raging because I wasn't me on the podcast, and whoever was on had started with a 0-0 game in the Old Firm Derby. I was like, this goes against everything the terrace is about. What are you doing? So, yeah, Motherwell 0, Hearts 0. It goes at the end, even though this is what you wanted to hear right away. And yeah, Hearts failed to make the top 6 due to failing to get 3 points in this one. I'll talk a little bit about the match soon. There was not much to talk about, but Neil Critchley is now under serious pressure. Now, I know what you think of Critchley. I know you think he's not a very impressive man. You've said that before on the show. I think Kenny Ewan said that as well. I think there was chat in the WhatsApp group yesterday similar to that. But kind of like the same with Cathro. I don't think it necessarily matters quite as much as folk think it does in the modern era of football. I think before you really needed to have a manager with who was that patriarchal figure, who had the charisma, who either had the charisma or had the fear factor for players to play for them. I think now it just matters how much of what you set up your team on the park and how you get the best out of your individual players for each game on a Sunday. And at times this season, he has improved Hearts in that respect from the shambles that Stephen Naismith... What happened to Stephen Naismith last summer? I have no idea. He seemed to have an idea for the team and then completely panicked based on the pre-season results and then tried to change it on the fly and things just became an absolute mess. Critchley kind of settled things down, got the best out of some players, but overall, I don't think he looks that good in terms of getting the best at what's at his disposal, setting out the team, and Saturday was just a mess of a performance. Again, he starts with a 4-4-2 diamond. It's baffling how he's become fixated on this formation when, other than the initial game in which he tried it out, which Hearts still ended up losing to Rangers, it hasn't really worked that well. Cartu and Spittle are usually the two who start in the middle. Neither of them look comfortable in that position. Spittle's form has dropped off massively as a result of having to play there. Even when Neuenhoff came into the team, he didn't look good there. That might have been him just coming back from injury, but again, it might have been having to play in a role that he's not familiar with. And Saturday was just the nadir for this because the shape was all over the place. Musa was out wide far too much on the right. Cabangu was drifted on the left far too much. I can understand that approach to an extent if you've got Lawrence Shanklin behind them, even though it doesn't really make much sense this season because he's got 4 goals in 40 games. But you can see why, like, Shanklin should still, in theory, be able to provide a goal threat from there. It's not the same when you've got George Grant in this almost false 9 position, trying to come up from the number 10 and influence the attack. There was also the kind of failure to get another right back in January, coming back to it again with Forrester having another shocker. But he was far from the only player that had a shocker in this one, so I don't want to pick on him. And finally, just on Critchley's approach in this match, taking off Elton Cabangu when you still might need a goal if St Mirren score, and St Mirren did score, and to which point he had to bring on Craig Halkett to play up front. Pathetic.
Yeah, it feels. I saw Ewan getting a wee bit of heat for this on the Discord back in. I agree with him. I don't think Hearts would have been any worse off in the long run if Naismith had just stayed in charge. Like, I know that like they had a poor start, but he showed last season they had it in them to put runs together. He would have performed better than Critchley in Europe based on what we saw from Critchley in Europe. Like, I don't know if I'm not saying it was necessarily the wrong call, but
I don't know because we were bad enough at the time that we might not have recovered to play that match as we did against Nicosia at Tynecastle. We were very impressive for the first half and got the 2 goals and got us the victory. So we probably would have beat Petro Cup, but we wouldn't have won that. So it probably would have balanced out. I get Ewan's point, but I think it was almost like for that to work, I think Naismith actually needed to step away from the club for like a couple of weeks to like clear his head and get a clear vision of what he actually wanted to do with the squad. And obviously that would never happen. So I don't think it is. I get his point, but I don't think he would have recovered from it. And this is a season where you have seen a lot of managers recover. So yeah, you may be right. We'll obviously never know that. It's an unanswerable question. But I just think he just, as I mentioned earlier, what he had in his head, he panicked, changed it on the fly, and just everything became a big fat mess quite quickly. And it just needed... You saw even with Liam Fox coming in that we played like our best performance of the season up until that point. It was away at Aberdeen. Because it was just needed anybody else to come in and be like, right, okay, this is what we're going to do.
Yeah, you might be right. But I think on the game, like that, I was following the results, obviously, and like seeing Hearts, it did very much look like taking a point, and I don't think that was. It always felt like St Mirren were going to at least maybe score, so it felt like you should be trying to win this game. And I could understand the opposite. I could understand a lot more to an extent. Vimmer at the end saying Motherwell heard St Mirren had gone 3-2 up, and they were a wee bit more more content to settle for a point, because it does move them a lot more towards safety, because Motherwell were chasing a goal, and chasing a goal also gets you that win, which basically would have close to guaranteed safety, which is great. But I can understand that you are chasing something which, even if you get it, might not be enough anyway. So I can understand that. But from Hearts' point of view, it's like the size of the club, what is expected of Hearts, I don't think you should be settling for I could understand if Hearts needed a draw to get to the top six. Even if that was the case, I think there would have been some criticism for Critch's approach of taking a draw at Fir Park. It's not like Motherwell are flying, but I would have understood it, because I've been like, he's ultimately judged on his league position, but he is judged on his league position, and he's failed to get them into the top six. And I have to say,
and for people who say, just to kind of back up your point there, for people who say, but when he took over the club, Hearts were bottom. Yeah, but we're only 6 points off the top six after 9 or 10 games. Like, that's still plenty of time to make that up. It's only 6 points.
You look at the table now. Kelly beat St Johnstone in March. I think it was in March. It might have been the end of February, and went into the top six when we won that game. It is not, and then we've only won one game since then. But it's not like it was some unachievable thing. I think Kelly were below Hearts at that point when Naismith was sacked potentially. Or if we weren't, we were pretty much in the same spot. It was definitely not some unachievable goal, because there are 5 good teams in the league this season, and somebody needed to finish 6th when the music stopped. And it felt for a wee while like Hearts had built some momentum, but it's really, really dissipated over the last while. I have to say, because I thought a lot of hilarity with the Shanklin chance at the end. Now, fair play, the one that he slices is atrocious. But actually, the chance at the end is a fairly good effort, I would say, in the situation.
He actually had 2, because he had one that he sliced about a mile over the bar. Not even, well, I won't say over the bar. Even if it had been on target, even if it had been a lot lower, it would have. It was wide and high, is what I'm trying to say in a very elongated way. But he also had another one where he kind of tried to lift it. It was try to do one of those ones where you. How would I describe this? Where you kind of make your body thin, and you try and hit it with your laces, but you get under it, so you're trying to make it dip, but putting a wee bit of power into it at the same time, if you know what I mean. Try to almost guide it into the top corner. He tried that with his left foot, and it was like if I tried to do it with my left foot. It was bad.
So, yeah, I mean that there's another discussion to be had. We'll maybe not have it today about Shanklin and
oh god, could do a fucking dissertation on him this season.
I was having there was massive clamour for him to start games at the Euros less than a year ago.
People were going mental that they start against Hungary.
And I mean, with some justification on the basis of the season that he just had, but at the same time, you can understand why he didn't, and that's been borne out with this. But yeah, I don't know what has gone wrong there. It is an enormous drop off in all aspects of his game. Because I think even the bits that he was better at have kind of been he's not. I say the bits he was better at, apart from scoring loads of goals, which is the bit that he's obviously always been considered good at. The creativity has not been there so much when he has been playing, which is probably what led to him being dropped. The fact that Wilson gets himself sent off and he still doesn't get in the team, and probably nobody's really bothered, is also kind of indicative of the season he's had. But I think the interesting thing for Hearts now is I see them, and we'll touch on Motherwell in a wee second, but I see them as a bit of a wild card going into the bottom 6, because it kind of feels like somebody that shouldn't be there. But at the same time, they are only 5 points ahead of Dundee. It's not we talked about that St Johnstone situation. If 3 teams win and one of them is not Hearts in the first game after the split, and they get sucked right into that, they are probably the team that has been least on a relegation battle footing of the last few months. Kilmarnock probably being the second one, because Derek McInnes has just spent the entirety of the season talking about chasing a top 6 spot, even when we were like bottom of the league. But it feels like everyone else, I kind of feel like you know what you'll get after the split, but Hearts, it feels like they could just, shackles off and win all 5 games, and it feels like they could do what Hibs did. And
nah, I don't believe that's going to happen. I think the team is just too good for that. Like, that Hibs team is an absolute disaster, and and you look at the form, because even like this game, and actually, do you know what? This is the best answer for it, to talk about Motherwell. Hearts were very poor in this one. It's one of the, we've not been great recently, but there has been a little bit of kind of the opponents, and a little bit of, like, if you think about the Rangers game, missing loads of chances, the Celtic game, try to have a goal, missed chances, got caught at the other end. The Dundee game actually played not that bad, just missed chances again, and we obviously got a man sent off. I think there's just a lot more quality there than other teams in the bottom 6. And even this match, Hearts were the better team. If anybody was going to win it was going to be Hearts. And that's why Hearts been pretty shit, because Motherwell were fucking guff. I'm swearing a lot on this show. Sorry, I'm very kind of hepped up. I came back from the gym. I think I've got a bit too much energy running through me right now. But yeah, Motherwell were terrible. Motherwell were really bad. And I do think that result made me think, that performance for both teams made me think, we'll be fine. I don't necessarily think we're going to win all 5 games, but I don't think we're going to lose all 5 games either. In fact, I'm very confident that could easily come back to bite me in the ass, but I don't think that's going to happen. And I mean, there was effort there from Motherwell and all that, but I mean, other defensively, I think they were fairly solid. Casey was good. O'Donnell had a decent enough performance, but they still did have moments where they let Hearts have good chances. I mean, there was the one cleared off the line for the set piece. There's Shankland's one at the end, which isn't a brilliant chance, but still a good chance it should be allowed at that point in the game. Khartoum should have scored in the first half. But going forward for Motherwell, rubbish. Absolutely rubbish. I thought Tory Watt, I was like, when I saw him, I was like, he's going to come back to bite us. I don't think he really done much at all. Maswarisi was another one. I was like, bit worried about him running out of defence. He done nothing. Callum Slattery, I actually could have convinced myself that Slattery was going to, that the game would finish Motherwell 1, Hearts 0, Slattery 76 minutes. He was barely in it as well. Like, they've got players like, they had to switch to the 4 at the back, which maybe made them a bit stronger defensively, but it did mean that their fullbacks were both really providing nothing. Thompson, not good. Kutrombis, not good. Not adding anything to this. Lennon Miller still doesn't quite look himself after returning from his injury.
He's only got what, 1 or 2 months to go now until he's the best player in the Scotland squad. So,
and I mean, I'm not going to. There's no point in having a referendum on Michael Vimmerler now, because that'd just be stupid, because he's barely in the job and not his players, and etc. etc. He will get the summer. Unless Motherwell will absolutely collapse, he will get the summer, and he probably deserves. And well, he will obviously deserve to have the stay up. But there is, going back to that David Gray thing I was talking about earlier, the decision to keep playing Ellery Balcom, it's kind of like, what are you doing? Like, one of those managerial decisions where you're like, this one decision makes me not trust you. Because it's a very strange thing to do. It didn't come back to bite them in this game. But Balcom didn't really, I mean, all the kind of Hearts chances, they weren't really things that he necessarily had to do anything for. So it was a game that, like, the worst goalkeeper in the league could easily have. And while Balcom is more capable of the spectacular reflex saves than Ashton Oxborough, I just don't think there's any doubt in my mind that Oxborough is a better keeper. And maybe it's to do with how Balcom plays with his feet or whatever, but I'm not even necessarily sure he's any good at that. I just don't get that decision whatsoever. Sticking with the inferior goalkeeper when you are still in a relegation battle until they win, maybe one more game.
Yeah, I would say they're the worst team I've seen this season twice. Like, they have obviously had other good performances, like, in amongst that, but just in terms of the own games I've actually been at in person, they've turned into the worst performances I've seen. I think they will have enough about them to stay up, because, as you say, they probably will win a game. It's like, it's the bottom 6. Everybody wins a game. You're going to win a game somehow, you usually think, and that's probably all they need. The same being true for Hearts, but they need a big rebuild, but I saw a list on Pie and Bovril of all the players that they've still got under contract for next season, and it's quite a lot. So they may need to try and convince some people to find their future elsewhere, I would say, because Wimmer doesn't look like the style that, from what I gather, he wants to play. Does not have a lot of Andy Hallidays and Stephen O'Donnells and these types in it. At the ages that they're at, like those two players would have probably been perfect for it like 5 years ago. But so it's very interesting to see where they end up, assuming they do stay up, which I think they will. But it would be a wee bit disappointing to finish the season the way they have, because I think for a large chunk of it they were more, even if they weren't playing well, they were more kind of hanging on to that top six and looked like they might be the one. And then kind of St Mirren have kind of maybe sneaked up on the shoulder a wee bit. I mean, as Hibs did, obviously, kind of longer term, but they'll be another team. I think we said this before we came on. They'll be another team who'll just be happy to get to the summer, forget about this season and rebuild.
Right, Craig, there's plenty more I could say about Hearts in terms of the fact that the entire fan base, as far as my friends were concerned, did they really give a fuck about finishing the top six, which shows you how this season has gone. But I think we've spoken enough about them. Scottish Cup semi-final next week. I'm not confident. I have to say, but I'll probably be on the Fridays of View for the Terrace saying, "Yeah, Hearts the win." Talk myself into it by then.
I can see Hearts winning it and then not winning like their first 3 games after the split, and it being like this kind of.
I always think we've got more chance of being in a relegation bother if we do win next week.
It could be Hearts v St Johnstone in the Scottish Cup final and the battle for 12th in consecutive weeks. You never know.
Right, Craig, thank you very much for joining me.
No worries, and thank you for having me on.
And thank you to everybody for listening. If you'd like to hear more from us, the best way to do so is to join the Patreon, patreon.com/Terrace Podcast. The lowest tier is only £2 a month. A tip for you, if you are signing up, then it's best to do so via desktop or an app, or the Patreon app. Don't do it. Sorry, actually, is that right? I think I made an arse of that. To do it via desktop, if you're on Apple, that's what to do, because if you do so via the Apple app, then it adds on a 30% charge per month, and that money just goes to Apple. So there's ways around it. If you've got an Android, you're fine. Goodbye.